Good evening. I'm attorney Delia Parker Mims, and you're watching Access to Justice. Now, you've heard the headlines and you've saw all on the TV show the recent events that happened with the University of Missouri and how the president has recently stepped down as a result of African-American students taking a stand to try to end what they believe is institutional racism. And today we're going to talk about that. And I'm fortunate to have with us the principal lecturer at University of North Texas, Mr. Neil Foote.
Thank you.
And I'll let him introduce himself and give us some background about his information so we can begin our dialogue. Thank you for coming.
Well, appreciate you being here. I've been here in the Denton community as a professor at the UNT campus for the last 8 years. Have a long media career as a newspaper journalist, working at the Miami Herald and the Washington Post. I've worked for the American Society of Newspaper Editors, helping them on diversity issues. Moved down to Dallas 21 years ago, working for the Dallas Morning News and eventually the Belo Corporation to help them on literally the cutting edge of the internet.
Okay.
And then in 2000, got a chance to start working for Tom Joyner, the nationally syndicated radio personality. Helped him launch his website, blackamericaweb.com, and then spent a good part of the last part of my experience there and continue to work with him on public relations and marketing for not only his company, but particularly now his foundation.
Okay, and you also now at the university, you lecture students a lot about race issues and gender in the media. That's right. You help contribute to the book Race, Gender, Class, and Media, Studying Mass Communication and Multiculturalism.
That's correct.
That's a long, big word.
It's a mouthful, and the great opportunity of being a professor here is I've gotten a chance to teach some of the introductory classes on just the basics of reporting and becoming a great writer and reporter. And then one of the fun classes I teach is Race, Gender, and Media. And so this class, we have anywhere from 60 to 120 students on this wonderful campus that, as you know, is quite diverse. Every class I open up and I say, if society reflected what we see here, it's a wonderful thing, which means we see blacks and whites and Asians and rich and poor and middle income all coming together to what I, on many classes, am a facilitator, that I can start a conversation, and in many cases I'm kind of refereeing, but then also helping students filter and understand the importance of understanding difference.
Right. Well, I will add briefly, I attended UNT one summer many moons ago. I won't say how long. It was a little bit, and I was privileged to go to the radio, television, film over one of the summer programs, and so it was an outstanding program, and it has grown in its diversity. So I do give kudos to the University of North Texas and how it's grown. Now, Neil, I'm going to call you Neil.
That's fine.
We just met.
Great.
This positions you in a really good time frame right now to talk about issues of race, university, and how the media portrays certain things. So we're gonna just jump right out the boat and talk about what's current in the news media right now, and that is being the University of Missouri, Mizzou as it's called. What are your take on what the students did and what was going on there?
Well, this incident comes at a confluence of any number of things that have happened in this country the last couple years, right? From whether we want to talk about Trayvon Martin from 2 years ago to all the other incidents that have put race in the focal point of our conversation. So if we look at what the students there have done, and that has come to national attention, is the sense and the feeling, particularly among African American students, that they were not being treated well. And we talk a lot in my class about microaggressions, right? That in the old days, and we've seen the footage from the 60s and even earlier that of lynchings, but in the 60s of fire hoses and dogs sent off to us. As we come into this 21st century, there's a sense that, well, everything's all right. We've got a black president, so we can get along, right? Well, we could spend probably another show talking about the incidents either you and I have felt where we've been in situations where wow, somebody who didn't look like me just said something or did something that degraded me.
Right.
And,
Let's talk about that a little bit. So we kind of give an example of maybe the frustration that the students were feeling. So we have a group of African American students at a predominantly majority school, and part of their concerns were that there were overt acts of racism directed towards them, either in their classrooms or as they're walking to and fro campus or in their dorm rooms. And they tried to address that with the president, who has since resigned, and those issues were not addressed at all, according to them. And they began their, I believe the first step they took was to try to address it with the president, and then they went on a hunger fast.
Yes.
And even with that extreme effort, the president still chose not to really address it with them until it got to the point where the football team, and we'll get to that, but let's talk about those incidents. Now, I went to Southern Methodist University, undergraduate. You went to Wesleyan.
That's right.
In the north. Where's that located?
That's in Middletown, Connecticut, so a small liberal arts school that, again, predominantly white. I was among the, I think at the time, maybe 8 or 9% African-American population.
Very, very small percentage. And I went to SMU in the 80s, and it was a very much similar type of environment. So I can understand from a very personal point of view that feeling of pressure of being one of a few in that environment. And then to top it off with the overt acts that are happening against you. I'll give you an example of one of mine. I was a resident assistant at SMU, and in one of the buildings that I was working in, somebody wrote nigger on the nigger RA, nigger resident assistant, on the in the elevator. And I am at this point a 19, 20-year-old. And feeling that pressure, feeling isolated, that's a pretty, it's a difficult thing to go through at that age.
Absolutely. I mean, on Wesleyan's campus, what happened was the Malcolm X house, which was where the black students lived, and it was kind of known as the Black House, as some campuses may have, had received an anonymous letter that was signed by the KKK. So again, this is Connecticut, 1980. So to the notion that here it is, us wonderful students at this great institution thinking that we were removed from such acts, suddenly, felt threatened, and literally kind of galvanized not only black students but certainly white students on campus to say, "Holy crow! What if this could happen to us? What does it stand for?" So, it's even on that small campus, one of the vehicles I was able to use to help kind of get the word out on that was, I was involved in the campus newspaper, the Wesleyan Argus, and I began writing stories and covering this issue, which also then led to even a special section, because in the late 60s, the campus was, just like many campuses around the country, had been a focal point for racial unrest. And many of the black students at that point had even taken over the administration building. And I was able to catch up with some of these alumni and talk to them about that experience and the importance then. So this incident of feeling vulnerable at that age, at a point where, again, for us in the 80s, is where you feel like you've gone beyond that, but you suddenly feel you're thrust into the moment.
So we can't really undervalue the amount of fear you're trying to study, and yet you feel alone, you feel threatened and unwanted. And you're talking about the 80s. I was in the 80s as well. We won't go into too many dates. And then we fast forward that to 2015, and we look at what's going on. We had a show on Access to Justice called "What's Going On," the old Marvin Gaye song, when he talked about too many brothers dying and things of that nature. And as you looked at all the things he was talking about, those things were still going on today in 2015. And we take that and put that, we're focused today now on that campus of University of Missouri. So it's something to value in terms of how the students felt and the things that they were going through. I think were kind of similar to the experiences you and I have discussed.
Absolutely, and what are the tools that they're able to galvanize this support is, and I know we'll talk a little bit more about it in a few minutes, but that notion of now using the internet and social media to get that word out, not only locally, for us, sure it was an issue there in Middletown, Connecticut. Probably didn't even get a headline anywhere in the local newspapers, right?
Correct.
And now what we see in 2015, that this is a global issue. It's a story not only covered by the CNNs and the Foxes of the world, but I'm sure it's been blasted across the world to bring it into the living rooms and the cell phones of people around the world to realize that this country that stands for so much is really still struggling with a critical issue.
And you're in a good position to discuss that in terms of how social media either helps, promotes, or demotes that issue of multiculturalism. Can you define that word for us?
Yeah. Let's talk about multiculturalism, which has kind of evolved over the years, and even some would say that multiculturalism really has evolved in some cases to inclusion. Well, that it used to be diversity, multicultural. At the end of the day, to me, it's how do we accept difference,
right?
But also accept everyone's differences, because we all come from different backgrounds. You and I come from different backgrounds, and we may disagree on certain things, no less blacks and whites, whites and blacks and Hispanics and Asians, whatever it is, and that's okay. Right? That's okay, if you create the environment for that to happen. And so if you think about the notion now of using social media in a positive way, which we've seen this hashtag Concern 1950 representing the first black students there at the University of Missouri, to, again, what's become a very volatile issue in hashtag, Black Lives Matter, that at the point in time that social media has been able to rally common issues under the umbrella of a common message is pretty powerful. I mean, we saw it also in the Arab Spring in the Mideast, how these have become vehicles to get the message out. And these have become powerful catapults of taking the issue from very micro-local. Columbia, Missouri. I don't know, you ever been to Columbia, Missouri?
I have never been there.
I have been to Columbia, Missouri, and it's, it's a small community. I mean, even I think, I don't know what the population is, but it's not much that you're going to say, oh, let me stop off there on my way, from St. Louis. It's a very small community. So to realize that this dot on a map is now a familiar place of discussions about what goes on in college campuses, what goes on in our communities is powerful. So
I guess at this point what we've identified is that we're in 2015 and we're still experiencing those types of overt acts of racism, as well as probably systemic racism, which we haven't even really addressed. We have social media that has been able to catapult that into more of a national stage for us to discuss. And as you and I are living tributes to that, it's an issue that has been plaguing our campuses for many years. At least we can attest during the times when we were in college. Would you say that it's certainly not simply on that campus? It's a larger problem that face many campuses.
Yeah, which I think is what we saw yesterday. Which I haven't seen a lot of coverage of, but there was a 1 million student movement. I don't know if you're familiar with this, but this was not just black students, but actually students at, I believe it ended up being at close to 50 plus campuses, who not only were protesting on their campus about kind of general race issues and diversity issues, but issues of fairness, of access, of even treatment of faculty and staff on campuses. I remember back at Wesleyan being involved as a student member of committees that were looking to increase diversity on campuses. And not only from the faculty side, but from the administration side. And clearly, what has to happen is it's not the only solution. I want to be very clear, but we know that if you have diverse voices around the table, the conversation changes because diverse voices will bring different perspectives.
Okay. And so you're describing a situation from this Missouri incident that has created a multicultural response, which is a great and wonderful thing. Let's talk specifically to your area of expertise, which is the media. You have a vast amount of experience in that, and you actually lecture on social media and gender and race issues and how it can be used to open up these conversations. How do you think it has been used?
I think what I always focus on with social media is that people have gotten caught up in the buzz. And to me, it boils down to really social media is one vehicle to get the message out. And it's really focuses on conversations, it focuses on engagement, and it focuses on listening. And so what social media can be used for, and I think some movements, and I think the hashtag Concerned 1950 movement has shown, is that you can rally, not only support locally, but globally for a cause that you believe in.
That's true.
And so that, from a positive standpoint, I mean, and I think about this, can you imagine Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King during this period, if he had social media on what his march on Washington would have looked like? There probably would have been 10 million people there, right?
It would have been
at that
amazing
period of time. So when we think about just how these moments in time have been captured through, which, and I'll speak for myself, an old person like me to see, whoa, okay, you could use this device, and people are actually how do you find out about that, right? Hey, because you're following. So that's unbelievable in a positive sense, right? The downside of this, right, is that is that there's a lot of negativity that sometimes get out of it. That people during this period in point in time feel threatened, feel accused of actions that they don't understand, that they feel that they're being called racist or doing racist acts when they really just feel like they're just living their lives and interacting with people based on what they know. And that's where we see a lot of this kind of backlash that says, it's not about, Black Lives Matter, it's all lives matter. It's not about Concerned 1950, it's about Concerned all students at Missouri. And I wouldn't disagree, it is about all those things. Every individual and any group of individuals has their concerns. What we've got to be conscious about social media, which is where my friends in the media have to be very, very careful about, is to put it in context. We've got to put it in context that just because you tweet something and I tweet back at it and we're going back and forth on it doesn't mean that represents everyone in our race, right?
Now, with this specific incident, the University of Missouri, how do you think the media is handling it or covering it?
Well, it's we've seen it so often that we're playing catch up. And catch up in the sense that this is yet another case where social media has been driving this story, and now we're catching up to figure out, well, what the heck just happened? Oh my gosh, the president and the chancellor are stepping. How did this come all about, right? So much of the conversation and stories are trying to recreate what has happened for students and faculty and administration who have been living this for the last year or 2 years or even longer. So part of that is we've been reactive. The bigger part of it is what I see some good parts of it that says we're trying to put it in context and looking at the broader picture nationally of what's going on, and we see some positive coverage. Some of it then is also focusing on some of the really very, I would say issues that focus on, I don't want to say negative, but seem to say that there's a counter-intuitive inclination of what's going on that says, well, this is just all wrong. And I think when the media gets in the form of saying, well, my expression or my feelings about what has happened to me is wrong, is really very dangerous. And so I think it's important for folks in the media. And let me just say, we do live in an era where it's about pundits and who speaks the loudest on 24/7 programming. But it's also important for us to step back and say, here are the facts.
Yes.
Let's be accurate. Let's be compassionate. Let's be transparent about who represents what point of view, and then let's be sensitive and use the right words to explain something, so that we don't, as media, fall into the same trap that we are.
Right. And it takes a critical ear to hear that too, to not simply hear what you want to hear, but be open to hearing the difference of opinions. And I'm glad you brought that up, as I was a journalism major in the 80s.
Okay.
And when I was in journalism school, we were always trained that as a journalist, you weren't supposed to give your opinion. And they weren't even supposed to know if you were Democrat or Republican or what you thought. You were supposed to simply present the news. And it's always fascinated me that we've gone through a period now where it seems the news, they've gone away from that platform.
Yeah, and that's a challenge for me in the classroom, because as much as I am pushing out the importance of digital media and social media, so much of what I still teach is about the fundamentals, which is good reporters ask great questions, and they ask more questions to get to the facts.
Correct.
Right? So what we've seen in the last 10 years, and particularly in the last, I'd say 10 years, is that this swaying away from facts on straight news journalism, and particularly, I think, and the documentation is there, the research is there, is that 24/7 programming has changed that dynamic.
It really has.
That I can't just read the news anymore. That now I've got to engage. I've got to be loud, whether I'm right or wrong, because that's what's going to drive viewers.
Okay. So when we look at social media in the context of University of Missouri and all the racial incidents that have been going on, I guess in a summary of what you're saying is we have to just be careful as how we weigh what we're looking at and the expressions that the students are making and the information that's coming from them and the administrators.
The notion that and I'll say this again, that in social media, as journalists, we're sometimes relying solely on as the factual base of what's been said and what's happened. And that's a part of the story. But and if you bring in a bunch of my students and ask them, well, hey, did Professor Foote say that you need to verify what's on that social media, what's on Facebook,
right,
what's on Twitter, they would say, oh yeah, he kept on saying it over and over again, because sadly today there are people who can just start. Someone can create your own Twitter account and take over your identity and start tweeting stuff that don't represent you. Or create Facebook pages or Pinterest pages or YouTube channels that have nothing to do with you. So what's our obligation as journalists? What's our responsibility as journalists? Is to step above that. And more power to social media and citizen journalists for helping getting those stories out here. Greater responsibility for journalists to step up and be better than everyone else.
Okay. Now, when we look at the issue of race, what is your take on a statistic? And you know what that means. Anybody can do a poll and can come up with numbers, and depending on who they question, you can raise that. But I'm going to throw a few out there. That 56% of white millennials thinks that the government has paid too much attention to minorities. A quarter of African Americans would agree. 25%, and 37% of Hispanics would agree. You think that's an accurate reflection of, let's say, the majority population getting tired of that discussion?
Well, it's an interesting way you phrase it. Tired of the discussion, which I think, and I'll kind of focus on that, because I think that you only get tired of the discussion because you're having the discussion. Which one of the key tenets that I used to promote in my seminars with editors and publishers on diversity issues, and even in race, gender, and media, and even in the number of incidents where I've been called in, and part of this is that we've got to talk about the issue, and so let's put it out front there. What has President Barack Obama done in this country? We can list any number of things, but what has he done? Is he's created this focal point, depending on point of view, positive or negative, about race in this country. what it's done then is in some cases really created this hypersensitive environment that puts everyone on edge a little bit. And yeah, I think 10 years from now, if we sit back at this table, maybe at a hopefully bigger table, bigger desk, right, then we're going to have this conversation and we're going to say, wow, can you believe what happened between '08 and 16? Man, there were just all sorts of things going, and now people are actually talking about it, hopefully in a way that says, I don't know what I was thinking about that, but this, right. Yeah, and quite honestly, what do we know is that in 2030 and 2040, we're an emerging majority. So really, the issue doesn't become I'm sick and tired of hearing about it. It's kind of like, oh wow, I'm part of it, and
right.
And I'm leading it, or I'm being led by folks who are part of this demographic change and social change in this country.
Now, one thing you mentioned in the beginning, and we'll get ready to wrap up, and I'll give you an opportunity to discuss. I want you to discuss your 3 points that you have to creating environments that are positive for students. But one thing you mentioned in the beginning was that this has had an effect that created a Million March, or I don't know how you phrased it. There was more groups talking about it, and more multicultural people standing up and saying, let's address the issue. So in that respect, social media has been very helpful to get that idea out,
raising awareness,
discuss it.
And creating the environment where we've got to talk about these issues. Race has never been and never will be a comfortable issue for us to talk about. It's about difference. It could be culture, it could be religion, but those have to be ingrained in our environment, and that's where leadership has to come into play. Whether it's let me direct you to and allow you to have an opportunity to talk about what you think campuses can do to try to improve that environment, which may be affected by the social media that's going on, and also the racism within it itself. What are some of your thoughts on the solutions? Yeah, solutions inform. And information has to come from the top down. Leadership. Whether that's a CEO, a publisher, a general manager, a university president, or whatever it is, has to set the tone that we are an inclusive environment and we accept difference and diversity and respect each other's opinions.
Okay, I'm going to jump in right here because we're down to our last few moments. And you also had mentioned earlier, we didn't get a chance to talk about, but creating those environments, including the administrations having a plan on how they're going to address diversity. You said first inform and come down from the leadership, plan, and then engage.
That's right.
And that gets us to where we get to our social media aspects of things. Mr. Foote, I am so glad you were able to come today, take the time out and discuss with us University of Missouri, as well as the different issues on race that we have, not only in Missouri, but really nationally. And as you and I can both attest, it's something that has been going on for, I guess since we've had America. I can attest to those incidents at SMU, and you've had some at Wesleyan. They have improved. And when I was a student, I accessed the student campus to help do that as well, the student newspaper, and you said you did the same as well. And in those days, it was just the newspaper. And today, we have access to media in different ways that help us bring across that message. If you would like to continue the conversation on race and college campuses in the University of Missouri, contact my blog at Access to Justice on WordPress.com. I appreciate you watching, and I appreciate Mr. Foote for taking time out of his day to come and talk with us.
Thank you.
For Access to Justice, I'm Delia Parker Mims, and thank you for watching.